Welcome back to Off the Pitch, the podcast where we chat with individuals working within and shaping the game of soccer from off the pitch. In this episode, we're joined by Dimitrios Efstathiou. Dimitrios is currently the Senior Vice President of Strategy at MLS side Atlanta United FC. Having started his career as a lawyer in the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, Dimitrios walked David and I through his entire journey so far, having spent several years at the league office itself in the MLS before transitioning to the club level with Atlanta United. Dimitrios brings a unique perspective on how to approach strategy in the game of soccer, blending his law background with his passion for the game itself. This is an episode full of golden nuggets, great insights, and overall great charisma from one of the top leaders in the league. Without further ado, let's get into the episode. Okay, good morning, Dimitrios. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. We're excited to learn everything about your career and your insights, and especially where you think the game is going over the next handful of years. But obviously, David and I have done a bit of digging on yourself and know a bit about your background from what we could find, at least. But for anyone who maybe has never heard of you, which is the case for a lot of the times on these episodes, would you mind just giving anyone listening a quick run through of who you are and a bit about what your career has looked like so far before we dig in deep to it all?
For sure. So Dimitrios Efstathiou, I am Senior Vice President of Strategy for Atlanta United Football Club. I've been with the club for 3 seasons now. This is starting out my 4th season with the club. And I have been within the football industry, soccer industry, for a little over 15 years now. So starting in late 2010, and so listen, I could go all the way back to kind of where I grew up, but I'll tell you guys that I'm a Midwestern kid, raised in Minneapolis, Minnesota. To a Greek family. So all of my family lives in and around Greece. So I spend a lot of time since I was a kid going back and forth between Europe and the States. I spent most of my adult life on the East Coast or in Europe. So went to school up in the Northeast in New York, and then I went to law school, and then after law school ended up practicing in London for about 5 years, and then coming back to the States in late 2010, early 2011, starting work with Major League Soccer. Was in Major League Soccer for 11 years, and then joined Atlanta United at the tail end of 2021. So that's very brief. I can go into all sorts of different details about personal life and kind of work stuff, but I know you guys are going to be asking me those questions too. So that's me in a nutshell.
Great. Thanks for the overview, as we'll go under that view in a second. But take us back to those earlier days. So obviously, got an idea of where the interest in the game come from a Greek family. But when did the love, the interest in soccer start for you? How has that evolved before you became working in the game?
So I want to preface, and this is actually really important to me, that the love for the game, which I have very much a ton of love for, is not why I work in the game. And I say that as a real fan of the game, that it is a mixed blessing to be inside the mechanisms of what is a global sport. And that is because it's different being a fan, right? And so I grew up playing. I would have loved to say that I was an awesome soccer player. I worked hard. Let's put it that way. I worked hard, and I'm always careful, particularly at Atlanta United, when somebody asks you if you play. It's kind of like, well, when your office neighbor is Jonathan Spector, you're like, not like you. I didn't play like you. So yeah, I played in high school. I played casually in college and continued to play co-ed as a young adult. But um, but the what got me into wanting to work in the industry was actually I wanted to be a foreign service officer, you guys. So like I went to school to major in international relations. I went to grad school and law school with every intention to be in the foreign service. And as I was in the middle of grad school, I came across a couple people who were working in the sports industry, and I kind of had this not a unique or a novel idea, but an idea that a lot of people have had before, which is, hey, what brings the world together? What allows people to talk to each other from different cultures, from different parts of the world? What helps, and I mean this earnestly, resolve conflict, right? And there's a lingua franca quality to soccer, to football, that I don't think any other sport gets close to. Um, the ease of being able to play the sport, the ease of being able to understand it and watch it, and to be close to people that you have very little other things in common about, but allows you to understand that person better. That is football, soccer at its core, and that's what got me into the idea of working in the industry and pushed me from uh, from a very early stage when I was at grad school to want to get in the sport. And that led me to an internship in 2004. I'm dating myself, guys. 2004 with Major League Soccer. I sought it out after doing internships in international nonprofits and government organizations. I then pivoted to soccer and worked there for a summer, had an amazing time. And the advice I was given by somebody who I now consider a mentor of mine, Mark Abbott, former deputy commissioner and president of MLS, said, "Hey, you should go work outside of the industry for a bit, cut your teeth, and then keep in touch, and we'll see. Get experience outside of the industry, broaden your horizons, and then come back in." And so I took that advice at heart, and I did that. And I went and I worked at a large law firm headquartered in London, Allen and Overy. It is now Sherman A&O. I think they renamed themselves because they went through a merger. And but at the time, a law firm in London with over 1,000 lawyers in their one office, and worked all over Europe. Worked in Egypt, worked in Iceland, worked in Russia, worked in Cyprus and Greece quite a bit, perhaps not coincidentally, and got quite a bit of experience in the corporate finance world, mostly equity capital markets and M&A work. And I say that not lightly, because these are like finance terms for like investments and understanding how companies grow through acquisitions or through new investors coming in and injecting new money. And the reason why I'm saying that is because that had unwittingly a ton of influence in me coming back into Major League Soccer. And so let me rewind a bit and tell you guys that, during that time that I was working in the law firm and working in Europe, it was not a done deal. It's like I was not certain that I was going to go back into football, and that wasn't for lack of trying. I was working my backside off, talking to people in Europe and England and in Greece and Italy, like about opportunities in football and with people at FIFA. And I was, not to mix sports metaphors here, but I was striking out. like a lot. And it was a grind. And there were moments where I was like, you know what? I'm going to be a corporate finance lawyer for the rest of my life. And I just got to be okay with that. And there was a lot of coffees that I was having, a lot of phone calls that I was having, establishing kind of relationships and connections, but they weren't panning out all that much. And I'm happy to say, in retrospect, that the connection I made through MLS back in 2004, somebody who became my boss, Bill Ordauer, at the time general counsel of the league, reached out and said, "Hey, there's an opening, and we could use somebody with your skill set. Would you want to throw your hat in the ring?" And the skill set had to do with that corporate finance and equity capital markets work, because if you guys remember, around 2010, the league was 13 clubs, I believe. But there was already a line of clubs that were coming in. Portland, Vancouver, Montreal were just coming in. And the league was slated for expansion, for growth. And what is expansion at that time, other than, essentially an equity kind of capital markets transaction? It's new investors coming in and buying into an existing company. And so I was lucky enough to land the job at MLS in their legal department, at the time, business and legal affairs. The department was 3 lawyers. It was small, and between 2011 to the end of 2017, 2018, when I made a shift in the league office, the league grew, and you guys are gonna have to check my numbers on this, but I'm fairly certain it grew by 10 clubs in that time. It went from 14 clubs to 24 or 25 clubs during that time. And that was an amazing amount of growth. And as you can imagine, the amount of legal work that came through the league as a single entity structure was quite a bit. And so I'm very proud to say that growth period also saw a really excellent growth within the league office of the business and legal affairs team, from 3 lawyers to 6, 7 when I left, team members. And that was an excellent kind of time in my life to really learn the ins and outs of the football industry, the soccer industry. And going back to your initial question about, hey, tell us about your love for soccer. Through that time, that what was my drive was not, oh, I love soccer, I want to watch the games, which I did like to do. But what was driving me coming into the office every day was, holy crap, we're making a league here that's going to connect our country, our continent, North America. I don't want to ignore Canada here because it was a huge part of the growth. It's going to connect our continent with the rest of the world in a way that we haven't been connected, in a meaningful way. Okay, once every 4 years, okay, we were connected if the national team did well. But here we were going to be connected year in, year out, week in, week out, at a number of levels, domestic, in international competition with CONCACAF. Like, it mattered every single week. And that brought us closer to not just Latin America, but also Europe, Asia, and that for me and was the most important thing of the job. And what continues to drive me today at a more local level with Atlanta, but it's about bringing the world into Atlanta and bringing Atlanta into the rest of the world as well. And that's no BS, guys. Like that is really what drives me in this job.
No, that's great. It is the world's language, that we can speak with our feet, and how that can connect beyond just the
and
fanship.
Our hands. Don't forget, and our hands. What?
Yep. Give the goalkeepers some love, and the people committing handballs.
Yeah.
So That's fantastic. Thanks for the run through and
Yeah,
sharing the context on, exactly, sometimes it is a deep love for the game.
yeah,
Sometimes people stumble into this world and
yeah,
fall in love with it then. Um, but over your 10 years at the MLS and kind of that inflection point of
yeah,
the league growing and expanding, how did your roles change? Because we know
yeah,
you had a few different ones. So talk us
yeah,
through how those changed alongside the growth of the league at the same
yeah,
time in that
yeah.
decade.
That's so excellent question. So, um, practically speaking, so within the business and legal affairs department, that my role changed quite a bit. So it started out working on expansion matters, but also working with the clubs on their sponsorship deals, media deals, because there was a lot of local media deals that clubs did at the time. As I grew in that role, we got more team members, of which I have to say, one of the strongest teams I've ever been in was the legal department that Bill Ordauer built out at MLS, which included people, one of whom you've interviewed, Michelle Heinsick, as well as Giselle Torres, and who works at USOC right now, Cesar Lopez, who now is the COO of Orlando City Soccer Club. So, like a really strong team. And the reason why I bring them up is we built this team. They were able to do a lot of the day-to-day work, our team members, with the clubs. And I was able to pivot and work on larger, uh, I would say, strategic relationships, like with U.S. Soccer, with CONCACAF, in particular when CONCACAF worked with CONMEBOL and U.S. Soccer to run the 2016 Copa America Centenario. So those kind of larger, what I would call kind of strategic soccer portfolio relationships that the league had, I got really stuck in on. And that, if you guys remember in 2016, that I think at the time was the most successful international soccer tournament per match, most successful soccer tournament that had ever been held in the world. So, and by the way, held in like the span of 6 months, they put it together, if you remember, because it wasn't sure if that tournament was going to take off or not. So, having worked on those types of projects, I was able to pivot from the business kind of commercial side of things to the sporting side, the technical side. That was something that was presented to me as, hey, we are trying to, we the league are looking to elevate the engagement of the league with the chief soccer officers. And the idea was I had a lot of experience working with the business officers of all the clubs on the commercial side of things, that, hey, can we replicate a bit of this work over on the technical side? And at that time, the league had just fully launched the targeted allocation money initiative, TAM initiative. So a bunch of new money had just been injected into the player pool at a scale that hadn't been done since the launch of the league. Like about enhancing the amount of money within the player pool. And if you guys remember, the difference of that initiative compared to the previous 15 years of the league at the time, almost 20 years, was that these were players coming in through transfers and loans. And that required legal work. And that required the league as a single entity structure to be really involved and help each club kind of walk through and manage those negotiations. And that's something that I had a lot of experience in on the commercial side. So I came into the player relations department as an SVP to help manage that department, and that was another team that I'm equally proud of, as I was with the business and legal affairs team, where a lot of sharp people who are still there at the league office running things, like Christina Labrie and David Scholl, who are who are kind of the heads of that department, with Todd Durbin as the top. So I spent several years in that department working with clubs, doing some pretty cool deals, helping elevate the teams. I perhaps not surprisingly, like, did a lot of work with Atlanta United, because I came in right when the club, actually the year after the club launched. So I joined the player relations department in 2018 and worked very closely with Carlos Bocanegra and Darren Eales. I worked very closely with Garth Lagerwey and Chris Henderson when they were in Seattle on their player transactions. And so I got to know what I'd like to say, both sides of the house from that. I spent 7-8 years learning the commercial side of the house of the league and all the clubs, and then I spent several years learning the sporting side of the house, working with all the chief soccer officers. So it was a privilege to be able to see both kind of a holistic view of the league.
That's fantastic. And I know when we spoke with Michelle before she went over to Real Salt Lake, it was a lot of the same, of getting like the behind the curtain of how the league operates before shifting into the club level. So for you making the move from the league to Atlanta United, talk us through that. Was that something that you were seeking, getting into the club level, or did the opportunity present itself and you took the risk? How did that happen?
I was not seeking it. I was approached by Darren Eales as a very unique opportunity to come join the club. Now, I will say, and it's easy to say this because I'm here now, but there's no other club I would have entertained. And I can go into more detail about that, but I will say the biggest difference, the reason why I was hesitant and not even thinking about going to a club, and Chris knows this, I'm kind of competitive. And so it was a really nice break to be working for the league and just to say, I just want to see a good game. I don't care who wins. I want the league to do well. I want people to watch the games. I want exciting games. That's it. I have a very different view. I want Atlanta United to win week in, week out. And I don't want to be too rude to the other teams, but kind of like, go kick rocks to other teams. Now, that's not to say I don't understand what what's good for the league helps us out as well. Again, like I said before, I'm privileged to have had that league experience and to understand the rationale for league initiatives, for league rules. I will not be one to complain about them because I understand the policy rationales behind them. But my club's interests are what's front and foremost in mind. So I want to get the best players. I want to get the best deals, and and if it takes a situation where maybe another team doesn't do as well because of that, like, oh well. If it helps United, I'm good for it. So that's the biggest difference, right? But to go back to what drives me in this job and in this industry is that connection through sport and through football, and the ability that I have in Atlanta United with an ownership structure that, and again, no BS, that puts community and our involvement within and around Atlanta as like the keystone to success. That is what, when Darren Eales approached me, I was like, oh, I'm in. I am in 100%, because I had the opportunity at the league level to see, working on deals like when the club transferred Miguel Almiron to Newcastle United, I was involved in that. on the league side, but working with the club. And I saw how challenging of a transaction that was, not because it was tough working with Newcastle United, because of how important that player was to Atlanta. And I mean Atlanta, the city, the fans, how important that was. And that was a very difficult decision. And that wasn't driven by how much money can we make. That was driven by what does this player mean to the club, and what do you do if this player leaves? Because you can't leave the club and the fans down. This is very important to them. So if you notice, like Atlanta United, not by coincidence, but very deliberately, has been at the leading in terms of the size, scope, profile of players that they have brought in and transferred out, but brought in. If a player leaves, new player that comes in, it's taking it to the next level. And that is because this is what our owner and our leadership want to do here, to bring the club and the fans together unified, right? Not to be too on brand here, but united together in elevating the city on a global stage, And that is immediately what brought me in.
Yeah, that's just completely true. I've been a fan of the MLS my whole life. And I've specifically this, I guess, January transfer window, as it's known across the world. MLS clubs have been incredibly active in both domestic and global markets. I think kind of specifically following that, the new league rule that they put in, being able to transfer ownership cash for players within the league. But like you were saying, Atlanta has always been at the forefront of, to be honest, almost every aspect of growing the game in the U.S. With the opening of Mercedes-Benz, with the opening of the training center when they started as a club, as opposed to opening it after they started. And then now, obviously, and we'll ask about it later, but the expansion of the training center. And then the Miguel Almiron deal, when it happened those years ago, was, I want to say, it was the biggest export out of the MLS at the time.
At the time, it was the largest outgoing transfer. Yeah.
So that's already at the forefront. And then on top of that, now you have, I know that it didn't really go that well, but you bring in Georgios Giacomakis from Celtic.
It went really well until we were put in a position we had to transfer him out.
Yes.
Earlier than we wanted to, by the way. We would have loved if he stuck around, but this is soccer, this is football, right? Like, anyway, keep going. I interrupted you.
No, it's totally fine. Because he was, like, you said it exactly correctly. He was scoring all the time. He was on the top of the goal scoring charts. So you're totally right. But then now, following that with Alexei Miranchuk, Lath, you guys have always been on the forefront of getting players to push the league's boundaries. Could you speak a little bit towards what this new ruling by MLS allows you guys to do in terms of like a long-term strategy perspective? Because a lot of people have said that it's been a long time coming, something like this. And with you having the previous experience on the player relations side within the league, I feel like you are pretty uniquely positioned to understand this ahead of time, and take advantage of that to position the club really positively.
So you're right in that this policy change has been percolating for a long time in the league, and not as a secret or anything. It's been, we are a single entity league, right? So every single player in the player pool, 900 plus players, there's one employer. Major League Soccer LLC is the employer, and they're assigned to one of the now 30 clubs across the league. So, and this is, all, you can see this all in the CBA, which is published online at the PA's website. And there's, I'm happy to say, like, a lot of transparency in this, unlike with other corners of the world on how these things work. But the idea of a player moving inside the league from one club to another, right? That their contract doesn't change per se. It's still the same contract. They're just assigned to a different team. And one of the challenges in being able to build or shape your squad in MLS is you're effectively previous rules. You're effectively restricting the valuation of the player within your own market. So, and this is something I love about this sport. It's a global marketplace, something totally different from any other professional sport in the world. We talk about baseball, we talk about NFL, we talk about basketball. For all intents and purposes, the marketplace is one league. You could talk about, okay, the Panamanian Baseball League, the Japanese Baseball League, for basketball, maybe some of the European basketball teams. But for all intents and purposes, it's really, there's one choke point of entry and exit in those professional sports. And so when there's a CBA in those sports, that CBA sets the floor and sets the ceiling for the marketplace. You can't do that in soccer, and that's a cool. It's infuriating at times, but it's pretty cool because it's a global marketplace and there is no one center power. Even the Premier League, and they are easily the top of the heap. No one will dispute that in terms of where talent goes. That's the top. They lose talent to other leagues. We're actually a perfect case study of that, because we took a player who was, and ostensibly reports have said there were EPL clubs interested in this player. We got that player. We took that player from English Premier League clubs who were really, really striving to get that player. So the point being, going back to your initial question, remember we were talking about tangents, is that with the rules in MLS as they were set before this season, the only way a player could move, right, between clubs, assuming they're still under the same contract, was a trade. There had to be a trade between the two MLS teams, and there was only certain types of consideration that were available to clubs in order to make that trade. It could be another player, which you often saw you see in other leagues, right? Like NBA and NFL and the like. They trade players, or cap space. Right. So that's the generic way to say it. For the league, and for MLS, we talk about it as allocation money. Right. But, for North American sports, it's cap space. You go outside of MLS to Europe, to Asia, to South America, and they're like, what are you talking about? We're talking about like cap space. No, cash, money. Right. So. And that's the global marketplace. There's a limited amount of funds in cap space by design, and it's a good design. This podcast is not a criticism of the MLS system. This is the way the system's built, and the league recognized a challenge, which was, hey, we are, by virtue of our own system, we are unwittingly, unintentionally restricting the marketplace for clubs to move players around, or players to be able to go to other MLS clubs, because there are a lot of players that want to stay in MLS. They do not want to leave MLS, but they want to get better compensated, all these things. And in order to help that happen more easily and have MLS clubs be able to compete with other clubs outside of our system on a more equal footing, they've created this new rule, which I know you said transfers. I want to be clear. This isn't my friends in MLS will appreciate this. It's not a transfer. It's a trade. So it's still a trade. It's just they've changed what types of consideration are available. So now you can use cash for trades. Now, in FIFA language, that's effectively a transfer. So you're not. I don't want to give you flack, David. You're not wrong. It's effectively a transfer, but in MLS language, it's cash for trade, and that enables us, the royal we within MLS, to have a lot more flexibility and options in how we build or remold our rosters, which is great. Which any rule or policy that gives more flexibility, like, you will find every single CSO will be supportive of it. And you saw it. What happened, within a week of the rule going into effect, there was 2 or 3 pretty big trades for cash that occurred amongst other clubs, which I was really happy to see.
Yeah, it's we've kind of the constant theme when we speak to people within MLS is the growth of the league and everything that's happened, not just from 1996 to 2010, which that was already a big amount of growth.
Right.
But then from 2010 to now is an even more, that's 2 or 3 times the level of growth that they saw in the first 14 years.
Right.
Which is really cool to see. And a lot of that also comes with clubs pushing the league to make these changes so that these things can happen. We saw that example with David Beckham in 2007 in the Galaxy. Yeah. And then again, just 2 years ago with Miami and Messi. Yeah. Also David Beckham happening to be involved again. But yeah, it's really cool. And then on top of that, regardless of superstar, incredible, world level household name players coming to the league, Atlanta has always been like I was saying, at the forefront of bringing that talent. And I've also, one thing I forgot to mention was bringing Miguel Almiron back this year as well as the other guys. But one thing I'm really curious about is, with your previous experience within the league office, do you think that gives you a leg up on your competitors in terms of positioning the club?
Yes. I was going to say something snarky about, you're asking me to toot my own horn here. So any job that you go into and you are able to better understand the interests of the various parties involved in getting deals done, you will be better at it than other people. So listen, I want to be clear. This is only one aspect of my job at the club. So when it comes to work around player transactions and managing salary budgets and rosters, I don't select the players, right? That's my colleague Chris Henderson's job as the general manager and chief soccer officer. He lays out the tactical vision, the player profiles, the playing style, the coaching staff. All of that is Chris Henderson's world. But when it comes to all of the support and scaffolding around the team he builds to ensure that team is able to compete at an elite level and in the most efficient way, I'm involved in helping him get that done. And that means working with the league. It means working with foreign clubs. It means working with agents of players. It means working with FIFA, with confederations and other federations, not just US Soccer, but foreign federations. And if you understand what's driving all of those other parties and what's in their interests in order to reach agreements, right? Like, what's the phrase? It takes 2 to tango. Well, in this case, it takes a dozen to mosh Like you want to have the mosh pit and have a good time. Like you need to understand why all these people are coming in the mosh pit, and to do it, not to punch or fight someone, but to actually dance. That's like, the awesome thing about mosh pits is that they're actually dancing together in a circle, and they're not doing it to hurt each other. They're doing it to to have a good time and to all party together. And so that if you understand why everyone's there and you can get them all to get along, you can get an agreement and get what you want as well. And that's what I try to do in all my work. So back to your initial question, not that we're talking about grunge and rock music and moshing, but when it comes to understanding the league, without a doubt, the work that I did at MLS with ownership at MLS, the product strategy committee, with all the various different departments of marketing, of media, of corporate partnerships, and understanding what's important to Adidas, understanding what's important to Target in launching and in partnering on the All-Star game. Like that is essential to getting deals done at the club level. And so yeah, that's going back to your initial question. Yeah, I think that gives me an advantage. I really do.
Definitely. And you're definitely uniquely positioned, as I think David had mentioned, to capitalize on this new inflection point of growth over the last few years since joining the club. But when you've gone from the league level to the club level and actually be a bit more boots on the ground, in the trenches with things, is there anything about that world that has caught you by surprise of what it's actually like at the club level as opposed to the league?
Yeah. There's that phrase of, I was going to use an American football phrase about any given Sunday, but the idea of like the week in, week out it is simultaneously a grind and one of the most like satisfying things ever. And that's because on a weekly basis, and my colleague Chris can confirm this, whether it's a home or away match, you get to be with a group of people you've worked hard with the entire week leading up to it. And then you see the culmination of that hard work. Now, whether it's a win or a loss is that's tough, right? If you lose, it's tough, but you're with all of these people that you've worked hard together on again, whether you're at a home match, you get to see a lot of different people at a home match because you're running the event, or it's a away match, you're with a smaller core group of people, but you experience that together. That's a bonding experience. And that is something that I wasn't ready for when I made the move to the club level. I am super, super grateful for it. And to be honest, I don't know if I could leave that club environment now, because that glue, that bonding experience is, it's addictive. It's a really, really awesome feeling when you're trying to, it gives you a way to constantly remind yourself like the importance of the work you're doing, because you see it with your colleagues and then you see it with the fans. And that, again, I don't want to be Pollyannish about it. It cuts both ways, because it's also like when you're going through it, when you're in the mud, and it's like a constant kind of like pressing reminder of like, how the hell do we get out of this mud? And once you get out of it, it feels really, really good. It feels awesome to be, whether you're cruising on consecutive wins or you're cruising because you've had really good attendance, really good execution of the events. You've seen a roster come together. You see the evolution of players gelling. You see a player come back from an injury. All of those things you and your colleagues have been part of making that happen, and you see that play out every week. And that for me is a really powerful feeling to get me, again, that connection with the rest of the world, that connection bringing us closer to other communities, being able to bring different people together. That is, I get that injection every week, right? Which is awesome. And I wasn't ready for that. I had a totally different scope before, Matthew, where I was like, hey, I'm looking at what's the next 5 years going to look like for the league. Now, it's not that I don't look at that still, but it's not, it's something I have to commit time to and think about, as opposed to what's happening in the next week, what's happening in the next 2 weeks, how's our club doing?
That's really cool that you say that. In terms of working with people who you're going through the same things with, and then you can kind of see those results culminate across the season. When we spoke to Dan McNally in our first ever episode, he kind of made an analogy. He's like, well, on this day, the ship's leaving the harbor, whether we built it or not. So we have to figure out what's going on so that we can try and have that success later in the season. And I think that's really important now, especially as we've kind of consistently been talking about the league and Atlanta growing. And with that, I want to touch on the expansion of the training ground. And so the importance of that relative to the club's future, and also how that kind of coincidentally fits into the city of Atlanta's host bid for the World Cup coming up next year. Because we were talking with also Chris Canetti, who is the president of the city of Houston's World Cup bid. And he was talking about how they have to work with a bunch of different organizations to get training grounds and get the stadium ready for all the different teams, who they're going to be hosting. But you guys are pretty kind of on the forefront of that as well, with already having the 6 training pitches at the training ground, and then now doubling the size of the facility itself. Can you kind of touch on how important that is to the city's World Cup bid, as well as for the club in the future, well beyond that point?
So let me say that for the club, it's integral, right? And I use club capital C, so not talking about a team, but the club. And I know you said kind of tongue in cheek, it's coincidental. The events that we're hosting in Atlanta, that the city is hosting and that we are part of, that our training facility is one piece, an important piece, but just one piece of that larger picture. And we wanted to make sure that our training facility in the city of Marietta was part of that, was part of all of those events taking place. But what's driving it is the club's needs first and foremost. And you're right, we're doubling the building space. So we still only have six pitches. So we're not expanding the outdoor space. About 33 acres of space that we have over in Marietta. But our training building was built for one professional team and about 3 academy teams. We are now 2 professional teams, Atlanta United and Atlanta United 2, and we have 5 academy teams. And with high school age academy players, we also have them going to school on our campus. So now it's a hybrid model, but there's classes. They're being taught, they're going to earn their GD at Atlanta United. So that's a long-winded way of saying, like, we're kind of like, bursting at the seams. We needed more space for the club, for the players and all the different teams that were training at our club. Now, and a huge part of that, a very important part of that was, and you guys might be familiar with Safe Sport and kind of the evolution of youth sports and the protections around youth sports. We wanted to make sure there was a space dedicated to our academy and development system, as opposed to kind of sharing some of the space like the gym and the treatment space for players. We created a distinct space for all of our development systems. So if you're not within the first team, but you're in the academy and you're developing, like we have now, we will have, come the end of this summer, we will have a dedicated gym for the development system, a dedicated treatment room, dedicated offices for the academy. And listen, we're also going to have some content creation space. We're going to be building a studio as well. That's very important. And Chris would yell at me if I don't mention there will also be a new press conference room. So there's some additional space that we're building out. But listen, it's part of the evolution of our club. We are continually seeking to improve and to mature our club. And so, we now have new needs that are different from 2017, and I'm very happy to say that we're growing out our building to match those needs. Now, we also happen to have a number of events coming through Atlanta in the next 2 years. We had Copa America this past year in 24, but we're going to have the Club World Cup here, 6 matches, and we're going to also have the World Cup, 8 matches in 2026. We are a training facility, a designated training facility for the Club World Cup. We are a base camp for 2026 World Cup. So part of our investment in the training facility was also having those events in mind, because you guys know the MLS season happens through the summer. We cannot shut down our training facility and not have our own club, particularly our first team, be able to train at our training facility. So in order to avail ourselves of the opportunity of hosting a federation as a base camp for almost a month in 2026, we needed to make sure that that was a dedicated space to that federation while we had our own club continuing to train on the same site. So I'm very, very proud to be able to say we're going to be able to do that. And by the way, it's not giving that federation some sort of small space. They're going to have a building with, office space, with their own gym, with, a treatment room, with 2 like FIFO class grass pitches, at their disposal for a month. And our club will still train on the other side of the facility. So that is something that we, in our development, that was definitely part of the plan, was to be able to make sure that that was available and on a go forward basis. So if there's ever any other kind of soccer event at that international scale where we're bringing in a club or a federation that would require that type of access to the facility, that we are ready to be able to provide that. To, again, toot our own horn, to say like, hey, you guys, whether you're, these are clubs that are going to be coming here to play for Club World Cup, whether you're Chelsea or Man City or Club Leon or Inter Miami or Porto, these clubs coming in, or whatever federation comes in 2026. Hey, come over to Marietta, Georgia. We're going to show you what world-class soccer facility looks like. And you're going to realize that MLS and Atlanta is where it's at. So, and that I will be peacocking like the entire time. And I'll be like, hey, this is where you thought you knew where soccer is? Guess what? It's right here in the heart of Georgia. Yeah. And so that's a huge pitch for us.
That's fantastic. And that speaks volumes to the growth of the league, to be able to be in that position, to peacock when the players come. I know, again, Dan McNally at Cincinnati had mentioned that with their training ground, of when the national team would stop by, that it would surprise players who are in Europe how high quality facilities actually are here. But we could spend another 4 hours talking about predictions moving forward. There's so much we didn't get to speak with you about that we would have loved to, if like your board member role at Aberdeen and everything. So we'll have to have you back on definitely in the future. But one final question I'd love to finish with before we wrap up is, your level of ambition is always looking forward, which is a commonality with a lot of people we've spoken with. But I do want you to toot your own horn for just 1 second to some extent. And I would love for you to just take a moment to look backwards at what you've accomplished, whether that is in your professional life or even if it's personal, or it all overlaps at the same time, even with your daughter being sick today and how that impacts things. But what is one thing or a couple, if some come to mind, that you can look back on about your career so far that you're most proud of yourself for achieving?
Oh, so I mentioned it earlier, and that is a very easy answer for me, which is the teams I've worked with. And so extremely proud of the team I worked with in the business and legal affairs group at MLS. I mentioned Cesar Lopez, Michelle Heinsick, Crystal Chen, Giselle Torres, Olivier Manigat. These are individuals who have all gone on to awesome big things in their lives after working at MLS. At the player relations department, the the number of people in that department that are now at other MLS clubs that are doing awesome work, not just within the league, but at clubs, right? So I mentioned Christina Labrie, David Scholl, Chris Savino. There's Mario Ancheta, who's at LAFC. There's Matt Radicek, who is at Philadelphia Union. There is, there's a long list of people that I've worked with that I am so proud of being able to work with them and then see them go on to do awesome things. And I'm seeing the same thing here in Atlanta United with the scouting team I work closely with Jonathan Spector and his team. And that for me is, we accomplished in all those groups, we've accomplished great things, but it's seeing those individuals succeed in their own lives and to advance in ways that have helped them, whether it's still at the league or at another club or in a different industry completely. That for me is the most rewarding aspect of the job, right? We mentioned about seeing the game and bringing the fans together, but at a very personal level, that is easily the thing I'm most proud of, you guys.
That's awesome. It always, the wins and the losses will happen, the trades will happen, but at the end of the day, and your point earlier, you spend every day, all week, every season with people. And it's the impact that brings that actually leaves the lasting footprint on your life. So,
and by the way, Matt, I'm gonna interrupt. Those people, bless them, had to listen to me on a regular basis, get on a soapbox and tell them about how I felt about something, and they just sit there and nod. They'd be like, "Okay, when's this guy gonna shut up?" And they had to do that on a daily basis, and they still hung out with me and worked with me. And so that actually is what I'm most grateful for, their ability to endure me and to tolerate me. That's the most blessed I've ever been.
That's fantastic. Well, look, Dimitrios, again, we could speak forever. It's been a pleasure having you on and learning about your background. And again, as mentioned, we will have you back on, whether that's on the tail end of the World Cup and we've got even more to talk about. Or
I'll have an MLS Cup trophy. Like. I'll have an MLS Cup trophy next to me, and we'll talk about that. It'll be good. Yeah,
whichever one comes first, we'll chat then. But we'll let you get on with your day and on with your busy week that I'm sure is going on. But again, thank you for joining us, sharing your background, sharing all your insights. Again, you're in such a unique position coming from the league and the inflection point that we're moving into again. So excited to see how you do push forward on the pitch, winning trophies, and off the pitch with all the commercial deals that you're positioned perfectly for.
Thanks. Appreciate it, guys. It's been a good time.
Thank you. Thanks for watching this episode of Off the Pitch. Don't forget to drop a follow or subscribe on the podcast platform you're listening from. That helps us bring stories like these to your ears each and every week. And if you have a minute, leave a review as well, as that helps us grow the Off the Pitch community and bring even more exciting guests on. See you in the next one.